Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with guest Jem Fuller, conscious communication coach. Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am the host of Bleep Bulimia. And today, this is going to be something different. I have Jem Fuller, who's a leadership coach, and we're going to be talking about communication. And to me, that's a really big topic. So thank you so much for being here today.
Lorianne, thank you so much for having me on the show. You know, when I came across your podcast through Podmatch, which is a platform that we both use, I was like, oh wow, I'm really interested in this conversation, and I think it's a really important one. And I'd love it if this woman would have me on her show. That would be amazing. But I didn't expect that you would, because I don't have any direct experience with bulimia. But I reached out to you anyway and shared with you a little bit about what I'm passionate about and my story. And you invited me on the show, and we've been backwards and forwardsing to get a time that works from Australia to where you are. But here we are. So thank you so much for having me on.
I love it. And where I am, by the way, listeners, I'm in Canada, so that is right across the world almost. So happy to have you on. What I was saying, and as I introduced you, communication is very huge. I know you're a leadership coach, but this is where we're going to move with. But I want to hear a little bit about your story before I let our listeners know more about you. Please, Jem.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and dot point it to keep it succinct. I grew up in a very kind of standard suburban middle class Australian scenario. So nothing really to report there, apart from the relationship with my father and subsequently my mother. But for me as a boy growing up, it was that relationship with my father that was quite determining of my story, my own self story and my journey. Loved him, completely loved him, but also was somewhat terrified of him as a kid growing up, and didn't want to be him, you know. So my rebellion against the man on the pedestal really kind of set me on my path. So as soon as I finished school, I couldn't get far enough away. I took off and started traveling the world at the age of 18, spent most of my 20s and early 30s just traveling around the world and running from, but also running to, aspects of self. And that had me doing a lot of wonderful, varied things. I've done everything from being a fire dancer to a traditional tattooist to a kindergarten teacher in Taiwan, a volunteer in third world countries, a laborer, a motorcycle courier, all sorts until
Wow,
I've, yeah, lots of different
I
things.
love it.
Yeah. And that was all just finding ways to make money to keep traveling. And I was really especially curious about traveling to countries that were very different to where I grew up. And at the time in my 20s, I thought that's just was a thirst for adventure. But I look back now and it was deeper than that. It was really, I was driven to connect cross-culturally. I was really fascinated about finding commonality and connection with people who grew up in a very different environment to me, you know, culturally, religiously, um, politically, geographically different. And if I could find a way to sit down with someone around a fire and connect in an authentic and deep way, I was feeling great about life. Um, so that was interesting, and that plays out now into the work that I do. So then, in my early 30s, fell in love, had children, became a father, and realized that I needed to find a way to raise these kids and pay for food and get a real job kind of thing. So I ended up working for an international travel company for 8 years, ended up in senior leadership, learned a lot about leadership, a lot about what I don't like in the corporate world, which is this incessant drive to maximize profit. Um, on the outside, I did a good job on the outside of creating an Instagram life. This was before Instagram. I'm a bit older than that, but I did a really good job of creating this Instagram life, which meant that on the outside, it looked like I was living the dream. You know, I had a corporate job. I was earning good money. I was married. We had 2 children. We'd built a house. We were ticking all the boxes. But in the meantime, I was deeply, deeply unhappy. And my relationship with self was toxic. My sense of self-worth was terrible. And this then played out into my relationships. So very sadly, it played out into my marriage, which ended up, and so then I had my midlife I call it my midlife awakening. Some people call it a midlife crisis, but I lost everything. I lost my marriage, lost my job, lost my house, lost everything except my two boys. And that was 9 years ago. And since then, I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to recreate my sense of identity, recreate and build my sense of self-worth. And so now I'm in a really wonderfully beautiful, conscious relationship with my other half, I call her, and my children. My relationship with my two boys, and they're young men now, they're 18 and 16, is beautiful, and the work that I do is wonderful, and I'm in a pretty good place now. So there you go. There's a snapshot.
I absolutely love it. It's actually interesting. I think today is the day for that because talking about my previous guest, we were talking about how our lives change for the better. And, but it doesn't just happen overnight,
No.
right? So this is where I was telling you previous to us recording that I believe, and you know, you always blame the other person sometimes for a period of time because it makes it feel better, but really ultimately my communication skills were really bad. Part of that, uh, I would eat my my ability to speak. And then I would
Right.
purge it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't with the right person. I did not know how to communicate with my ex-husband. I really did not know how to do it in a healthy way. And so, yes, 18 years ago, we divorced. I'm much better now. I'm very, very happy with myself. I do not have another half or I like
Yep.
that, the other person, because some people say the better half. No, if you're not equal, you're not.
Yeah.
um, but what I'm saying is, I really do believe that communication, what my lack of being able to do so, I do have a father. Um, yes, I wanted to aspire to be like him. But scared the heck out of me, both my mother and father, right? Both of them did. I'm living with them now.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's not so, it
My mum
changes,
lives with me now.
right?
Yeah. It's amazing how things turn.
It's the circle of life, like they say, you know, the Lion King. I love it. But just quickly, what I'm saying is that I think that everything takes you to a certain place, but I can communicate with my mother better. I can communicate with my father better. I even said to him the other night, I said, you know, I'm so sorry I missed out on a really great relationship with you because I was so scared of you that I didn't even know how to communicate other than, hey, Dad, I'm doing well at work. Hey, Dad, I'm doing well at school. Hey, Dad, I'm doing all of, you know what I'm saying? The achievements were
Yeah.
what I would talk to my father about, not what mattered in life
Yeah. Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Seeking approval and, seeking
Yes,
this, am I okayness for you? Am I okay enough for you? Just seeking that.
yes.
And yeah, my teenage years with my father were the only things we spoke were pass the salt or, turn off the
Oh,
hot
wow.
water tap or, perfunctory stuff. We never spoke about the deeper stuff. Um, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm really curious, Lorianne, if you could kind of have a look at your communication with yourself, like your
Mhm.
relationship with self and the way that you talk with yourself now and compare that to 20 years ago. Is there much of a difference there?
There's huge. I mean, I love Lori Ann. I
Yeah.
love me. Whereas back then I was looking for um the love of other people. Like when I was with my ex, his love towards me mattered more than the love I had for myself.
Mm,
And I put myself secondary to him, which you
yeah.
should never do
No, no.
because
Yeah, sorry. You
right?
go.
I was just gonna say because if you do that, then they feel it. It's like they say, dogs feel fear. You know, it's and
Yeah.
your partner will feel that you're and different people will react different ways with that particular experience. But if you hold on to yourself, like where I'm at today, I probably would have been a stronger person. And I'm not saying that our marriage would have lasted, but a stronger person when even the marriage was failing. It was like I was like I always say, do you know the Little Mermaid?
Yeah, yeah.
You know the little the little minions that are the big beast. I felt like
Yeah.
that. And it's not
Yeah.
that he was that beast, but I made myself feel like one of those.
Yeah.
And I think
Completely.
it's our choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you were a little minion or the little creature and you needed that big, scary creature in your life for you to be what you were, you attracted that. And your
Yes.
perspective, your perception of this person was that. For me, my version of that was that I had a deep, deep subconscious belief that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't enough. So I attracted a woman into my life who every day, my perspective of her was that every day she was showing me where I wasn't good enough. Why aren't you more like him? Why aren't you better at that? Why don't you do this? Why every day? But I attracted that. That's what I needed in my life at the time because that matched my belief around myself. It's interesting. And I don't know about you, but when I was in a place of, I'm going to say self-loathing, that's a strong term, but it really was that. When I was in that place, the quality of the communication with myself was terrible. I was really horrible to myself. The choice of words, when you look at yourself in the mirror and you are admonishing yourself or reprimanding yourself, and you're using really horrible words on yourself, words that you wouldn't use on anybody else, not even your enemies. And I think that this is the place to start
Yes.
any kind of change that you want to see in the outside world. If you want a better relationship or you want better results at work or you want a better quality of life, it's got to start with you and self-love. And one of the ways people say, well, how do I love myself? That's a concept. What do I actually do to create a self-love? And one of the ways into this improving this relationship is the quality of the language. It's the communication. It's the choice of words that you use. You know, start to notice your self-talk and change it.
Mhm.
And this becomes a practice. It's like yoga. You don't get good at yoga and then tick the box and stop doing yoga. I still practice this every day. I look at myself in the mirror every day and tell myself that I'm good enough, that I'm worthy. I love myself, just like you said, I love Lorianne, like that, right? And it becomes a practice. But even when you don't show up to a certain standard that you were hoping, so you've got these core values and you don't quite show up to the level that you were hoping for, even when you're coaching yourself in that moment, you can still do it positively. There is never an excuse to be cruel to yourself or to anyone. Cruelty is just dysfunctional. You can still say, hey, I say to myself, hey, come on, Jem, you can do better than that. You know, you're a good man. You've got good intentions. You're out there trying to do good work. Come on, mate, step up. So I'm still holding myself accountable to the way that I want to show up each day, but I'm doing it in a positive way, not a negative way.
You're absolutely right. And the funny thing is too, is that when what you're saying, thank you for sharing, you become more aware. So if I drop something, I go, oh, you clumsy. Mm, bleep
Yeah.
bleep, right? And then I
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
wait a minute, you're not clumsy. You just made a mistake. And I'm
Yeah.
very self-aware of all of that. Like that is, I think the biggest thing, right, Jen, that you would be working with is being aware because some people are not aware. My mother, she goes, oh, I'm so stupid. I go, don't you ever use those words in front of me? She goes, but I am. I go, no, you're not. So I realized that living with them now, as we spoke about, I'm living with my parents. I realized that some of that might have been something I learned listening to my mother put herself down. So as parents, it's important to be very aware that, and I did it to my kids. I'm sure I did it to my kids. I'm so sorry because I wish I knew what I knew now then,
Yeah. 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 But you do know
right?
now, and you're running a
Yes.
podcast and you're talking about these things. And so you're doing your part to help us to help humanity evolve. And we're human. And it's interesting. I think that we can switch out those words rather than saying I'm so stupid or I'm so silly. Just say switch it out for the word human. Oh, I'm so human. You know,
Yes.
because we're human, and we try our best. you know Most of us try our best, even people who end up doing horrible things. Most of us, except for psychopaths, most of us don't know how to do it any better. But most of us wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm going to try and do my best. People don't wake up in the morning going, oh, how can I go and cause harm? Most people don't. There are some leaders perhaps that do, psychopaths, but I'm going to put them to the side for a sec. People like you and me, we wake up in the morning trying our best. We just trip over ourselves and we don't know how to do it any better. Even as parents, I look back to when my kids were little and I'm like, oh dear, wow. That might have caused some trauma, but I was always trying my best. So I think that we can forgive ourselves and just do what we can do now to help raise the level of consciousness.
Absolutely. So, moving towards you being a leadership coach, tell us a little bit more. I know this is, a Bleep Bulimia podcast, but I think that anybody can learn about what it is that you do. Give us a little bit more of an idea. Do programs like how do you, what is it that you do? Give us a story.
Yeah, look, I work with leaders, um, and kind of there's two parts to what I do, but they happen consequentially. I work with leaders to help them become better leaders, which for me means for them to be more aware, more conscious, for them to be more equipped in self-leadership, which means how do I lead myself to what I'm hoping to create? So how do I get better at driving my own bus? How do I get better at how I choose to show up in relationship? Because it's all about relationships. Everything we do is in relationship with others. So how do I show up? How do I be more conscious? And this leads into more human-centric leadership. So, better sense of compassion and understanding and communication and all of these beautiful soft skills that people used to kind of push them aside and say, oh, they're just soft skills. Show me how you make more money. That used to be the way. And that's old. We know that. So there's that part. And then what I'm also really curious about is how leaders can create better culture, workplace culture. And what I mean by culture is how humans work together. So how do humans come together and work together to create a common goal or purpose? And I'm passionate about that because without each other, we don't exist. We need each other, us humans. And so I'm really curious and passionate about connection and communication, even and especially across the divides of difference, right? So someone might be pro-choice and someone might be pro-life. That's fine. You are completely entitled to your opinion of how things should be. I 100%. But the way forward for us as humanity is in the communication, not the fighting. That's not going to improve the situation at all. It's in our ability to sit down and have discourse, especially over the things that we disagree on. That's where we really need to be able to have empathy and compassion, respect, and the ability to communicate and find a way forward for humanity. It's crazy over the last couple of years with this COVID thing. I've seen families fall apart because of a difference of ideas around vaccination. I've seen families disown each other and say, you are no longer my daughter. This happened to a friend of mine. Her family said, you are no longer our daughter because she was anti-vax and they were pro-vax. Now, this is just an idea on what you think is the best thing for us to do. It's just an idea. It's not actually who you are, and we identify with our ideas. And you and I were talking, we mentioned very briefly before we started recording about this sense of identity and ego and how that really can play out into our experience of life. And sometimes emotionally, mentally, physiologically in a very dysfunctional way because we've identified with something or some things, whether it be good for us or not. But we fight to the death to defend our sense of identity. We really can make ourselves not well, as you have experienced and I've experienced in different ways. But so when someone identifies as I'm anti-vax and someone identifies as I'm pro-vax, they will go to war over that. And that's crazy. This is your daughter. So anyway, I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but
No, that's
yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, but it doesn't even just go with the backs. It's like I'm sorry, but like We have the people who I love Trump and I hate Trump, and we've
Yeah.
got the people who, you know, there's global warming, there's no global warming. I mean, just agree to disagree. I have a friend who has her ideas. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't, and she
Yeah.
loves me because I'm open-minded. We're
Yeah.
there for each other as two humans loving each other, and she has some thoughts. I have some thoughts. She doesn't agree with mine. I don't agree with hers. I agree with hers. But the point is that our love is beyond our opinions.
Yes. So true. So true.
And
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 that's a perfect
that's
example. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really important for communication. Um, our love is more important than our opinions is so important for communication. And
Absolutely.
when you really pull apart all of the external layers of opinion and you come to the core center part of what it is to be human, we've actually got way more in common than anyone thinks. I
Mhm.
remember this time in the 90s. I was backpacking in all across the world, but this time I was in Pakistan, North Pakistan. It was actually in 1998. So this is pre 9/11. And the American administration had sent cruise missiles in to try and kill Osama bin Laden back in 1998 after a
Mhm.
terrorist bombing in Africa on an embassy in Africa. And I was in North Pakistan when these cruise missiles were sent in. And I remember traveling on a public bus. And I was sitting next to this university student who was a devout Muslim, and he spoke English, and we were getting to know each other. And he showed me the front page of the newspaper that day and said to me, "This is what's happened, and jihad has been declared." And I didn't know what that was. And he said, "The extremists have declared jihad now on America." That was in 1998. So when the 9/11 thing happened a couple of years later, and I was traveling in Spain, I was like, "Oh, gee whiz, that's what they've been planning to do." Anyway, that's a little side story. This Pakistani Muslim that I was sitting and chatting with and connecting with, he said something that I'll always remember. He said to me, "If I cut your skin here and I cut my skin here, we have the same colored blood,
Mhm.
you know?" And he said that to me as a metaphor for we're actually the same, you know, and you can extrapolate that metaphor out to, we all worry about, are we enough? We all fear isolation. We all need love. We all need food and shelter. We all need air and water. We all care about our children. We all feel the pain of loss when a loved one dies, right?
Mhm.
We have the fundamentals in common. And I think we need to remember that,
Yes.
and then we can move into communication with each other, and accepting our differences, and more than just accepting our differences, harnessing the power of diversity, harnessing the power of the fact that your friend disagrees with you here and you disagree here, and that's powerful as a relationship because the two of you in your love for each other are more than the sum of the parts,
Love it.
you know so yeah, that's
Yes.
what I'm passionate about.
I love it. It's and that's what we were also talking about. I mean, I had in the breakup of my marriage. I mean, you can blame anybody and anybody, but ultimately my inability to communicate, and I would eat my emotions and throw out my emotions because I couldn't speak them. That's on me. That's on me. That was my choice. But to learn how to communicate, and some people you can't. Some people, there's a wall and you're not going to get past the wall. But this is where people like you will help with the communication. Maybe you can help them get through that wall, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's really, because seriously, there's some people that's just a brick, you know?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. And sometimes that wall will never be um, surpassed. And sometimes it's about just turning around and going, well, I'm actually going to go and find myself in a different direction.
I like that. It's true. If you can't get through it, don't knock your
I,
head against the wall. Is that what
yeah,
it's like? Just
I knocked
don't.
my head against, I knocked my head against the wall of my marriage for years.
Yeah.
You know, I tried to heal. I really wanted to heal. My the manifestation of my self-loathing came out in sexual intimacy. I put all of my anxieties into that space, and through the course of my marriage became completely dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So I couldn't perform sexually. I would have anxiety attacks and it was terrible. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't do it. And it became a very sad story in our marriage because she didn't know how to help me and I needed her help. And she thought I should fix myself and I didn't know how. And I tried and tried and tried for years.
Yeah.
And it was really, really sad because this is one of the parts of the story of being male, of being a man. I'm doing in inverted commas for any of your listeners who aren't watching us, of being a man is this ability to be able to perform in bed, you know, and there's so much stigma and pressure put around that is not spoken about because it's a taboo subject. But a lot of men suffer in silence of this: I'm not good enough, I'm not big enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not sexually capable enough, right? Which is a whole other story. But I suffered in this anxiety for years, and I really wanted us to be able to fix it, because you don't get married thinking you're going to get divorced. You get married thinking you're going to spend your lives together, you know. And we had children, and I didn't want to traumatize my children. That was the last thing I wanted to do. So I tried for years and years and years and years, and we just couldn't. It was a brick wall that I was banging my head against, and I had to eventually, I just had to turn around and say, I'm never going to get through this brick wall. I've got to turn my attention in a different direction and go and heal myself away from this, you know.
And healing yourself away from whatever it is very important. And I'm so glad you're sharing this because again, it's not on him. I'm taking it on. I did put it on him because it made me feel better at time to put it
Yeah.
on him, but I'm
Yeah.
taking ownership. And I think that is really important to do and
Yeah.
say, but not in a negative way, saying, but if you don't, if you're looking, it's like they say even about entrepreneurship, right? If your business fails and you're not looking at why it failed and you're not taking some ownership of it, you're never going to learn. Same thing with a marriage. So I had to take on the responsibility of learning what was my part in that marriage that failed.
Yeah.
Communication was really bad, and we drifted apart because of the lack of it. We got really well with business, but on a personal basis, when it came to talking about anything intimate or anything, that just never worked.
Yeah.
So, and as we said, and I worked for many years too, not traumatizing my kids or anything. Unfortunately, the children will be traumatized no matter what. But the other thing too is I think they'd be more traumatized if they had to go through another like 20 years of watching their parents not happy.
Oh,
So
completely.
yes. And as they become adults, they understand a little bit better. It's very painful for the children. And I know my kids went through it, but I think as my daughter is now becoming an adult, she's saying, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
completely.
So
My kids are saying the same thing. And my partner's kids are saying the same thing too. They're a little bit younger. They're 15 and 13, but they're already getting it. Especially the 18, 16 and 15-year-old. They already get it. And now they get to witness a beautiful, conscious, loving relationship. So now they get to see, oh, that's how it can be. You know, and I'm really, really glad that they get to see that. But just coming back to something that you said, Lorianne, around taking responsibility for your life and how your life is. When we push responsibility to our partner or to the outside world, when we externalize and say it's their fault, we're actually disempowering ourselves, because if it's their fault, I can't do anything about it and I'm stuck. And that's not a very nice place to be. When we take responsibility and say, hang on, this is my life, I'm creating all of this, then I'm coming from a place of feeling, wow, I can do something about this. I'm empowered now. And if I feel empowered, then I feel like I can take some steps, small baby steps, but I can take some steps, I can take some action to improve the quality of my experience of life, you know. But if I'm blaming others, you can't do that. So I think it's so important what you said about taking responsibility, because then you're empowered. Then you can create the change you want.
absolutely. And I really appreciate you helping people with communication, because seriously, it's a big thing. And you also have to learn, is the person you're with for a lifetime somebody that you can communicate with or not? And it's not a failure to say that if you hit that brick wall, walk the
Yeah.
other way,
No.
because life is too short.
Yeah.
And, and you have to, as you so well said, then you take control of, and there's no, I don't like the control thing, but you're right about taking control of your when you take responsibility, that you can change it, that
Yeah.
it's not up to them for changing it, it's up to you to change it.
100%.
And I love that you
100%.
said that. Love
Yeah,
it.
it's interesting. I've done a lot of work with relationships with couples as well. My partner and I, prior to COVID, we run retreats, and one of the retreats we run is a conscious relating retreat for couples. And it's interesting. We have this premise, this foundational pillar of our relationship, which is that we don't hope for the other person. We don't expect the other person to change at all. We've promised to love each other just the way we are. So any change or improvement that I hope for in the relationship, I'm looking at myself. How can I improve? How can I change? I don't expect her to change at all, and vice versa. If she does because she wants to, great. That's wonderful. I support evolution and a raising of consciousness, but only if she does. If she
Mhm.
doesn't, she shouldn't. So when we start to let go of this expectation of the other person and how they should show up and the other person and how they should be, we let go of that and direct that gently back towards ourselves. I think it's a really functional perspective to have.
That's very true, because I mean, I think in both cases with my ex, he expected things of me. I expected him to be more, open and talk to me more, but that wasn't him, and he expected me to be a certain way too. And those
Yeah,
expectations, yeah, they can definitely, yeah, set you
yeah,
like apart. I mean, when you met each other, that's, what you fall in love at that moment. That should be all that you expect is what
yeah,
you fell in love with, right?
yeah,
Not any
yep.
changes beyond that. So,
Just as you are. But quite often people fall in
yeah,
love with the other person's potential. They fall in
yes,
love with their potential. And
yes.
they say, oh, when he figures out how to be a bit more this, or when he gets a little bit better at that, he'll be the perfect man for me. It's like, oh, geez,
And I was
that's
actually the
interesting.
opposite. I fell in love with his unpotential because I knew he had a bunch of potential. I was afraid when he finally realized his potential,
Right.
I wouldn't be good enough for him.
Right.
And I really believe that. I thought, once you get to where you want to be, because I know you're going to get there, please don't get there, because I'm not going to be good
Yeah.
enough for you.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
and it
We
may
are,
not have been the case, but I manifest that stuff, right? You think about it. I really want you to share with our listeners where they can find you, because I think, and I was explaining again, communication. A lot of people who have eating disorders, bulimia, or whatever, our struggle is with communicating, and in the proper way, and to know when it's time to turn the other way if you have to, because we're, perfectionists, or we're not quitters or stuff like that, and it's
yeah.
just not doing us service. So
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
let our
Absolutely.
listeners know where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I wrote a book in during the lockdown here in Australia. We had 2 years of lockdown here where I live, and I wrote a book called The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men. And it's interesting that although the book was written for men, lots of different groups of people and especially women are reaching out to me and saying thank you so much for your book. And there's a whole chapter in there about the relationship with self and communication with self. And in fact, the first quarter of the book is it starts with you, and it's about your relationship with self, your sense of identity, the way you communicate with yourself, and how important that is. And there's very tangible kind of strategies in there that you can implement into your life very easily that make a massive difference, whatever you're struggling with. And humans, we all experience suffering or struggle in various different ways. For some people, it's
Mhm.
bulimia. For some people, it's sexual anxiety. For some people, it's depression, or whatever it is. We, it's a human thing that we do. And I really feel that this book, well, I know now it got published a year ago, and the feedback that I'm getting is blowing me away. It's really making me feel so grateful that I've written it and published it, because it's helping people. And I think it will help your listeners too. So you can find the book, The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men. And it's on Amazon and Booktopia, and wherever you look, you'll find it. Or if you want to reach out to me and you're curious, I'm very accessible. Just go to my website, gemfuller.com. So JEMFULLER.com, and you can reach out to me through my website, and I'll reply to you and say hi and see how you're going. There's also my online courses. There's a course on there, Mindfulness Made Easy. So it's a beginner's course in mindfulness meditation, and mindfulness meditation has been a massive component of my self-healing and continues to be. And I'd like to offer that course to your listeners for free. If they want to get it for free, just in the coupon code, just put Spring Gift as one word. So Spring Gift, pop that in and it'll make the course free for you, and you can download it and have it forever.
Beautiful. And in all fairness too, Jem, I do want to make sure that I qualify this. We talk about this. Bulimia is not just women. There are a lot of males that struggle through eating disorders and bulimia. I still believe that whatever they do for this percentage of people are, men will not talk about it as much because it's not talked about, just like you were talking about, the drive and how men are expected to. Same thing. I mean, I had a trainer when I lived in Reno one time, and I had a great trainer when I was in the gym, and he was bulimic, and he shared with me because I shared with him that I was. But that's something men most of the time will not bring up. So I do want to make sure that our listeners understand if they're eating disorders and bulimia being this, it's not an age, it's not a race, it's not a gender, it's out there. But communication, to me, why I wanted you on here, is to me a big factor, whether you're communicating with your other or just learning to communicate. You being able to say, hey, what do you want to communicate right now? Like, what's going on, right?
And something else, I know you're probably aware of the time, but if I can just say this bit as well, just that moment when you opened up to your trainer and your trainer opened up to you. There's a chapter in the book also about how you are not an island, and we suffer in silence because of shame, and we think no one would understand, and so then we can't communicate because we feel misunderstood, and we feel like, what's the point, because no one will really understand what I'm going through. When you have the courage to open up and be vulnerable and share your struggles, you find other people who are struggling in a similar way. It's amazing, and they go, oh wow, you too. And then through this shared vulnerability, through this shared struggle, which is communication is a sharing, that's what it is. Through this opens up a pathway of healing, right? And we can heal together. So I think it's so important, and thank you for reminding me that bulimia doesn't discriminate.
No, it doesn't. And
at all.
And anything too, and even and I'm sorry to say, but even the sexual part that we were talking about and performance, so it's also on women too. It doesn't discriminate. These things are across the board, and I love what you're doing. I love that you're helping people to communicate, and that you're helping even, like, I hope that you can get your retreats going again with your equal other half.
We're going again. We're going again next 2023. Yep.
Okay,
back to
so
Bali,
that'll be on your website, Jem Fuller.
Yep, that's on the website.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the notes will be in here, listeners, in the notes. And so I really, again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for your podcast and the conversations that you're having. I think they're really important. And I'm cheering you on for the good work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And likewise. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Lorianne.
Sure.